Have you ever watched a bird sitting on a wire as a plane passes overhead and wondered what is going through its tiny head? Does it panic? Does it ignore it? Does it even notice at all? We share the sky with birds every single day. Billions of flights, billions of birds. And yet we almost never stop to ask what the experience is like from their side. Because here's the strange part. Birds were flying long before we were. The sky belonged to them first. And then one day, enormous metal creatures started appearing up there, moving faster than anything alive, roaring like nothing in nature, and the birds had to figure out what on earth to do about it. So what did they decide? What does a bird actually make of an airplane? The answer is stranger and more surprising than you might expect. Let's start with what birds see when a plane goes by. Birds have extraordinary vision, better than ours in many ways. They can see ultraviolet light. They can spot a mouse from a great height. Some species can even detect the Earth's magnetic field visually. But all of that remarkable vision runs into a problem with airplanes. A problem that researchers did not expect. Many birds cannot tell that a plane is moving, not because they are foolish, but because of how fast aircraft travel. A plane crossing the sky moves so quickly that a bird's brain may register it as a fixed object, like a building, like a tree, something large and stationary in the distance. So a bird glances up, sees what appears to be an enormous, motionless shape in the sky, and thinks something like, "That thing is far away and not coming toward me. I do not need to move." And then the plane arrives. That is why bird strikes happen. Not because birds are careless, because they are using a perfectly good system that was never designed for anything moving this fast. Now think about what birds do when they actually sense a threat. Every bird species has built-in responses to danger. A shadow passing overhead, a sudden sound, a shape that moves like a predator. These responses are ancient. They work beautifully against hawks and eagles and falcons. But an airplane does not behave like any of those things. A hawk has wings that flap. It has a recognizable silhouette. It banks and tilts and circles. Birds evolved to read those signals. An airplane has none of them. It holds a rigid shape. It moves in an unnaturally straight line. It makes a sound like nothing in the natural world. So when a bird does react to a plane, it often reacts the wrong way. Some birds try to dive beneath the aircraft. It is an old anti-predator instinct. Drop down, get below the threat. Against a hawk, that works. Against a plane on approach, it puts them directly in the flight path. Some birds freeze, some scatter unpredictably. Some do not react at all until the last moment. The problem is not that birds lack survival instincts. It is that their instincts are working on a creature that does not fit any category they have ever known. But here is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Some birds learn, not all birds respond the same way to aircraft. And a big part of the difference comes down to experience. Birds that live near airports behave very differently from birds that have never encountered a plane. A wild bird hearing a jet engine for the first time may flush and panic. But birds that have lived near busy airports their whole lives, they barely look up. They have learned that the noise comes, the noise goes, and nothing ever happens to them directly. So they treat the plane the way a city pigeon treats a bus. It is loud. It is big. It is not my problem. Scientists call this habituation. The brain stops treating something as new information once it has been processed enough times without consequence. So, to an airport sparrow, an airplane is not a monster. It is not a predator. It is just the world. Loud, regular, predictable, and mostly irrelevant. And then there are the birds that do something even more remarkable. They change their entire schedule because of planes. Birds near airports have been found to start singing earlier in the morning than birds in quieter areas. Not by a few minutes, by up to 45 minutes earlier in some species. Why? Because they figured out when the planes arrive. The first flight of the morning tends to roll in around 6. The noise builds quickly after that. And birds that need to communicate, to find a mate, to defend a territory, need to be heard. So they begin their morning calls before the roar starts, before the sky gets too loud for anyone to hear them. They did not sit down and plan this. They did not hold a meeting. But across generations, the birds that sang a little earlier left more offspring, and slowly the behavior shifted. What that means is remarkable. Some birds have quietly rearranged their lives around our flight schedules. Now consider the birds that do not live near airports. The ones who encounter a plane only rarely, perhaps during migration. For those birds, a passing jet is possibly one of the strangest things they will ever experience. Imagine the scale. A migratory songbird might weigh less than a coin. A passenger jet weighs over 400 tons. When one of those passes nearby, the sound alone can be disorienting. The pressure wave from a large aircraft changes the air. The sheer size has no reference point in nature. There is nothing in millions of years of avian evolution that prepared a small bird for this specific encounter. So what does it do? Usually something instinctive and unhelpful. It freezes. It calls out. It watches something it cannot categorize and waits for a behavior it recognizes. The giant thing never flaps, never circles, never does what a threat is supposed to do. And then it is gone. The bird goes back to what it was doing. That may be the most honest summary. For most wild birds, a plane is not a predator, not a flock member, not food, not a rival. It is just a very large and confusing event that keeps happening and never quite makes sense. And what about the birds that are genuinely intelligent? Crows, ravens, and eagles are a different matter. Crows, as we know, can recognize individual human faces. They remember who has been kind and who has been threatening for years. They pass that information to other crows. They solve puzzles, use tools, and understand cause and effect in ways that still surprise researchers. So, what does a crow make of a plane? Probably not much in terms of categorization. But crows near airports have been observed treating taxiing aircraft as background furniture. Walking within meters of small propeller planes with apparent indifference, they seem to evaluate risk in real time. This thing is big, but it is slow and it follows a predictable path. I will step out of its way. Eagles are different again. Some hawks and eagles have been recorded attempting to challenge aircraft, especially smaller ones. To a territorial raptor, a large object moving through its airspace might trigger a response it cannot suppress. This is my sky. That thing is too big and I am going to tell it so. These are the birds that come closest to having an opinion about aircraft. And the opinion, where it exists, seems to be somewhere between annoyance and confusion. Here is the thought that puts it all together. We built machines that broke almost every rule the natural world had ever established. Nothing alive moves that fast. Nothing that size is silent. Nothing without wings holds still in the sky. And birds, with no instruction manual and no evolutionary preparation, have had to make do. Some panicked and got it wrong. Some learned and adapted. Some rearranged their whole daily rhythm. Some barely noticed at all. They did not ask what an airplane is. They asked, in the only way they know how, what does this thing usually do? And slowly, across generations, they found answers. We share the sky with birds every time we fly. We are moving through their world, through the spaces they mapped long before any human looked up and imagined something better than falling. And from down on the wire, watching metal thunder past at speeds nothing living ever reached, a bird does what birds have always done. It waits, it watches, and then it goes back to the business of being a bird. Maybe that is the only sane response.